AEW has fallen off. Hate to say it, but it's time to be truthful. AEW just doesn't feel like the AEW we all initially fell in love with. When AEW first reared its head in the wrestling world, it was groundbreaking. It really felt like a revolution. You had this wrestling renaissance led by independent wrestlers that wasn't technically supposed to happen, but they made it against all odds and built a company from the ground up to take on the biggest wrestling company in the world, WWE. They broke all the rules and they made people believe that anything is possible. In a situation like this, it's pretty hard not to root for the underdog. There was just something so magical and alluring about AEW during their first 3 years from 2019 to 2022. Wrestling fans had been dissatisfied and fed up with WWE for years and were literally frothing at the mouth for an alternative, and AEW fulfilled just that. AEW was a sort of savior to fans, and they prided themselves on listening to the fans, and in return, they were more than grateful to support them. That's why, every single week during the early AEW Dynamite episodes, the crowd was hot as holy hell, screaming as loud as they can for every single match on the card. Those early days of AEW were really something else, come to think about it. It's one of those things where you had to be there to see it all unfold in real life or on the internet. 2019 to 2022 was truly a spectacular and phenomenal time to be a wrestling fan because of the emergence of AEW. They were breaking boundaries that no one ever thought was possible, and the company could do no wrong. Even though they were rough around the edges, AEW simply could not miss. AEW also had a mission to prioritize actual wrestling on their TV show, and they did just that every single week as the matches were excellent. While it was a different style to the formulaic style of WWE wrestling, it was refreshing and the fans loved it. This is one of those things that AEW still does well to this day. Their wrestling is really good, as seen with AEW Revolution 2023. The pay-per-view itself was an excellent pay-per-view, but the build-up was pretty questionable and had many problems that we'll get into throughout this video. During 2019 to 2022, there were constantly debuts happening in AEW, and a lot of them were people from WWE jumping ship to AEW. This simply made AEW can't miss TV, as you never knew who might show up and make a splash. WWE was even shaking in their boots at the momentum that AEW was gaining and tried to stop them in their tracks through different methods, but nothing ever worked, and AEW passed every challenge with flying colors. They were truly shaking the professional wrestling world up, and the wrestling economy was in the greatest health it had ever been in over 20 years. There was opportunity everywhere for wrestling talent, and that was all because of AEW. They injected a much needed boost of energy and freshness in the professional wrestling industry between 2019 and 2022. The biggest strength of this time period was their stellar storytelling. Their storytelling at this point was something extraordinary. For a long time, long-term storytelling was not prioritized in wrestling, but AEW made it the standard. There were so many amazing storytelling elements that AEW incorporated into their storylines. The subtleties, the nuances, the little seeds that were being sown in the storylines was something that was so intoxicating and kept you glued to your screen every week. Stories were complex and they reflected real life situations, real emotions, and fans weren't accustomed to it, so it was a novel experience for a lot of AEW fans. The storytelling was quite simply on another level, and that's why it's so shocking that the standard of storytelling has fell so low, and that's one of the reasons that AEW has fallen off.
WWE tells stories, and AEW does not tell stories. They just book matches. There's no storylines, okay? This is not true. There are storylines. Now, here is my point. I am not saying that there are no storylines, but what I am saying, what I have determined from all of this, is that the stories that they are telling are significantly less important to the current AEW fan base than the matches themselves. In other words, these fans want to see these big matches, and they will watch the show, and they will understand, for the most part, the storylines. But understanding the storylines and being invested in the storylines are two completely different things.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It feels like AEW for the most part has lost their ability to tell compelling stories. Storylines in AEW used to twist and turn and kept you on the edge of your seat, but now storylines are nowhere near as interesting as they used to be. It's almost as if good storytelling is taking a backseat to professional wrestling, which is not inherently bad, but it turns a lot of people away from the product and ruins the prospects of growth. This is why, as of late, there has been a resurgence in WWE. WWE is now great again because they are telling great stories again. Triple H at the helm of WWE managed to get WWE back to being the hottest wrestling promotion in wrestling. Especially the storyline with the Bloodline has been an absolute pleasure to watch. It's such a rich and deep story that has been going on for a long time now, and it has managed to solidify Roman Reigns as one of the greatest ever champions in WWE history, and has managed to elevate Sami Zayn onto another level as fans absolutely adore him. The Bloodline story works so well because it has so many layers, it's compelling, interesting, and highlights the beautiful and ugly aspects of human nature, which are all things that AEW used to do very well, but they have been lacking in all of these aspects as of late. Another reason AEW has fallen off is because their main storytellers throughout the first 3 years of AEW have either left the company or taken a step back. Cody Rhodes leaving AEW actually hurt them in a way that was not evident at first, but now is more evident than ever. He was one of the founders of AEW, and all of his efforts were vital for AEW's success. He was woven into the fabric of the company and was one of the reasons that fans loved the product, especially in the early days. It cannot be understated how much he is missed in AEW. Cody Rhodes basically knew how to tell stories.
Cody has been around the concept of telling weekly television since he was like a kid, you know?
Even though fans began to hate him, he still had a massive impact in AEW, backstage and in the ring. Him leaving the company was honestly one of the reasons why AEW's initial identity and allure is not as recognizable as it was. Some people say that Cody saw the writing on the wall and that's why he left. But now that he's shining in WWE, and considering everything that has gone down in AEW since he left, this may have been the case. On the other hand, the whole CM Punk Elite situation was also really hurtful to AEW. All of the wrestlers involved, CM Punk, Kenny Omega, Man and Nick Jackson, are all excellent storytellers, and they are responsible for some of the best moments in AEW history. CM Punk brought a lot of eyeballs to AEW, and when he left, after the brawl out at All Out, he left a huge hole. And since he hasn't been back and potentially may never come back, a lot of eyes have been diverted away from AEW, and they may stay that way. CM Punk brought so much to AEW and turned them into a genuine force to be reckoned with. But without him there, AEW just feels a little empty. The Elite are also massively important for AEW. They are the literal backbone of the company. When they were suspended, they were sorely missed, but at least they're back from this period of absence from AEW. Even though they're back though, it's almost like they've taken a back seat in terms of storytelling. Of course, they're still active and had 7-match series as well as performing at 2023's AEW's Revolution, but they aren't telling complex stories like they used to before. They really are taking things slow in terms of storytelling. They're probably taking things slow because of their age and their bodies deteriorating, which is very fair, but this is still affecting AEW negatively, seeing that they are literally AEW, and without their immaculate storytelling on the show, AEW just doesn't feel the same. AEW has a plethora of talent, but very few of their active wrestlers have the capacity to tell stories like how the Elite or CM Punk do, which hurts AEW. But AEW still has wrestlers who could tell amazing stories, and one of these is MJF, who is the current AEW World Heavyweight Champion. But there's been a genuine problem with MJF as of late.
And as great as MJF is in the ring, and as great as he is on the mic, he is the most one-dimensional wrestler in wrestling today. Characters in cinema are never meant to be the main character, because when they are, the movie ends up being boring. Exactly where AEW is right now, boring. Right now is the exact same person that he was on the first episode of AEW Dynamite. Narcissistic asshole. Great on the mic. His promos are very formulaic now. The crowd, make fun of the city, make fun of the company, make fun of Tony Khan, generational talent, everything is mid, I'm better than you and you know it. Did I miss anything? Change up, he repeats the same thing every week. Every single feud MJF has been involved in, he walks in the same person and he walks out the same person. He is not evolved at all. Time we get close to a potential babyface turn, or he shows vulnerability, or shows just some layer to his character, reverts right back to the same person. Like a haha tricked you moment. Which has basically trained me to never believe a single word that he says. Even if he decides to turn babyface, I will never believe him. Most of his feuds go the exact same way. Lies with somebody, type of trust, advance himself. He turns on them, he puts them through hoops and hurdles to get to him, finally get to him and they have their match. Then he does the same thing to the next person and he moves on. Cody, he did it with Jericho, he baited Punk, which led to nothing. Then he did it to Wardlow. And left as a negotiation tactic, third faction by the way, in an AEW World Championship match, practically handed to him, entered in that championship match with an actual story that for the first time in his life, he's not going to cheat. He's going to do it himself. Some character development there and fucking cheat anyway, undoing any possible character development. At least he's alive with the sixth person that might change him as a character, right? Nope, he turns on him like 2 weeks later. Same one-dimensional person he was before. Character right now is not built to be the main one. Reflection of why AEW is not the main company.
Of course, MJF is a generational talent, but his feuds are so repetitive to the point that it gets kind of boring. Honestly, MJF is suffering from the same sort of problems that Hangman Adam Page suffered from during his title reign, in the sense that the booking has not been so great and it could be better. It also doesn't help that MJF is constantly bearing AEW. It's not only him though, as other wrestlers have voiced their dissatisfaction for AEW, with Eddie Kingston being the most recent example. But what message does this send to AEW fans?
If you do something like this once every 2 or 3 years, it's probably not that bad, but this stuff is stupid. You know what I mean? Like these fake work shoot angles over and over and over again. It's really like WCW, and that did WCW a world of good, as you remember, because it led to terrible morale of the talent because the talent thought they were being worked. So they didn't believe nothing, which is the worst thing you want, is your talent not to trust you. And the audience didn't care. They stopped caring. In AEW, there are people who bury the company possibly as a work, but at this point they shouldn't be working like we want to leave, working like we're looking at going to another place publicly. That is doing the company no good whatsoever.
It sends a message that AEW is not the place to be, and as a viewer, you should take your eyes and money elsewhere. Wrestlers publicly bearing the company that they work for is never good. There's also many other issues in AEW that are too many to count, but the booking is the most obviously glaring problem that I haven't mentioned so far. Like seriously, AEW went from having the greatest tag team division in all of wrestling to having the Guns as AEW World Tag Team Champions. No disrespect to the Guns, but they are honestly not championship material. There's many other problems with AEW, and I can't name all of them as this video will be about an hour long, but evidently the honeymoon period is over. That's why I feel like other AEW content creators like Tranquilo Club and Stunner Kingdom barely made any AEW content in the last 6 months. The product is just not what it used to be. It's as simple as that. Don't get me wrong, I will always love AEW and will always be rooting for them, but they're just not the same product that we all fell in love with at first. Hopefully AEW can make a comeback because it's so important for there to be thriving competition in wrestling, but I guess we'll have to see where everything goes. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other videos, but anyway, goodbye.